Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. I'm really glad you're listening because we have important information for you this week, as always. We start out covering the Epstein files. Then we dive into what happened with the elections. After that segment, we find out why did Donald Trump try to oppose SNAP, even though that has long had bipartisan support. And we close the show celebrating Care Workers Month. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a fantastic leader, Shauna. Oh my God, I have to read you. I'm just having an issue. I haven't eaten enough food today. Okay. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by an absolutely fantastic leader, Shauna Thomas, who's co-founder of Ultraviolet. Welcome, Shauna.
Thanks for having me, Kristen.
I'm excited that you're on because you have been working on women's rights, on people's rights, on making sure that there is not disinformation for a really long time in really effective ways. And right now, recently, there has been increased attention on the Epstein files and on what's happening. Some are even saying that the Republicans were keeping the government shut down just so that they wouldn't have to release the Epstein files. So there is a lot happening right now related to the Epstein files. Can you give our listeners, our audience, a little bit of a background on why the Epstein files are important and what's happening?
Sure. It's actually very sort of a very long and complicated situation that sort of lands us where we are. But so maybe I'll like summarize the upshot, which is um, I think what most people probably know very well is that Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused children, young girls, trafficked young girls and women, and more than 1,000 women actually. And there has been sort of speculation for quite some time about how many people in elite positions of power, including our current president, were not only aware of Epstein's activities, but personally involved in them. And we have yet another situation where you have this horrific set of stories that are only that we only know about because of survivors had the courage to come forward and hold an incredibly powerful man or group of men or a group of people accountable. And instead of like immediately, right, wanting to seek justice and wanting justice for the survivors themselves, the ones who have survived, because as of course we know, some of them have taken their own lives, and also send a powerful signal to other people in positions of power that this type of behavior is not going to be tolerated and can never be replicated again. Instead of doing that, we're playing politics as usual with survivors' lives and with the epidemic of sexual assault and harassment, not only in this country, but across the world. Where we are right now is that the House Democrats essentially forced the Epstein estate to release about 20,000 records. They chose to release 3 emails a couple of days ago that made a direct connection between Epstein and Trump. House Republicans followed suit and released essentially the rest of the file. Um, and I think they were sort of hoping is that, what Democrats were looking to do was to sort of have a conversation about what was going on with Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, instead of having a conversation about the end of the shutdown brought about by, decisions made by Democratic senators. Instead has happened is, right, but so what's happening now is that the House and the press, frankly, is very, very focused on these emails, less focused on the shutdown. And you have a potentially very embarrassing situation for Trump that he's sort of trying to tamp down, right? He doesn't want there to be evidence that Republicans are moving away from supporting him. He doesn't want to be in a situation where he has to veto a bill that compels the release of all of the Epstein files, which could further implicate him and who knows how many other people. So we have this situation again where we started, which is that you have a set of survivors, abusers, the general state of survivor justice in this country, which really hangs in the balance so often in these situations where politics is really kind of the name of the game for most of the people who are in a position to bring about justice rather than the survivors themselves.
It is complicated. I'm so glad that you spent a moment with us to explain a lot of it. And one of the takeaways from what you just said that I have is that there are more files out there that haven't been released yet. Did I hear that?
Yeah, well, quite a few. Yes. I mean, the I actually don't know. I don't know what the quantity of the sort of volume is, but yes, there are enormous amount of files that have yet to be released. The way that those get released is through is gonna is will has to happen essentially through legislation. The House, this is also connected to another really important feminist sort of concern, right, in the ether that's been out there, which is, what is going on with this Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, who was elected and not sworn in. She finally gets sworn in, and this is significant because she represents the 218th vote on the discharge petition that would force a House vote on the release of the Epstein files. So that she is now the first thing she did after she was sworn in was to sign that petition. But of course now there has not actually been, the House vote has not actually happened on that bill yet. But let's say it does and it passes, that needs of course to go to the Senate, and we don't know what will happen there. And then of course from there, of course, there's enormous potential for Trump to veto that bill. So we're very far away from a full release of those files, but we are, we're in a place where we can see now who really is interested in seeking justice and who isn't.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really important point. And another important point that you made is that it does appear that Donald Trump is trying to keep those files from being released. And it also appears, interestingly, that a lot of the MAGA supporters do want it to be released. So we are seeing a potential weakening of the coalition behind Donald Trump. I don't fully understand what's happening with that, and I know you know a little bit more about it. What is happening with that weakening of the coalition behind Donald Trump related to the Epstein files?
Well, it really depends on who you ask, and it kind of depends on who you mean. So on the right, of course, there was and has been a lot of conspiracy theories that have driven some of the right-wing agenda, a lot of the right-wing narrative over the last 8 to 10 years. And one of those conspiracy theories around pedophilia and Jeffrey Epstein, and the story about Jeffrey Epstein has featured pretty prominently, which of course is not a conspiracy theory. It's true. It's real. We have proof. But a lot of many, right, millions potentially of the people who sort of ushered Trump and Vance, MAGA, really into power, really believe that there is this sort of elite sort of cabal conspiracy to sexually abuse children. Um, and there is understanding Epstein is sort of part of that story. It really is the only is this sort of tangible part of that story, right? It's the true part of that story. They want to see those files released, and they want to know which elites are implicated. So there's, I mean, if that's a big part of your base, and you're validating that base in order to get elected, once you're there and you have an opportunity to expose these files, right, and to then your base, those people are gonna want you to do that. There are members of Congress who are very loyal to that base, who came to power through that base, who are now kind of representing that base, right, by demanding the release of these files. There is also a working theory. It is possible that some of these Republicans also are genuinely interested in justice for the survivors and the victims of the Epstein kind of child sex trafficking and abuse network. So one would hope that that's also present, but it's at minimum sort of a combination of the two going on, at least on the Republican Party side.
What can people do in this moment, both to get justice for the survivors, both to also help stop sexual abuse from happening in the first place, and to get these files released?
So survivor justice has been such a big part of like the work that I've done, the work that you've done, that we've done together over the last, 10 plus years. And clearly there's enormous amount to still be done on the justice side. There's an enormous amount to be done on the work to prevent sexual abuse and assault and harassment in the first place. Certainly accountability, right? In these moments where you have just this and just a mind-blowing abuse of power that has destroyed so many lives. Accountability is essential in these moments, and it's essential that it's not politicized, right? That it is not a football, right, in the hands of two political parties that are just trying to get each other. It needs to be driven by, and it's led by, and it is driven by and led by survivors. I think there are a couple things. There's things that you can do related to this specific situation, which is to call your Congress people and ask them to move this bill forward, especially if you live in a Republican district. Move this bill forward, get this bill passed, and move it on to the Senate, and let's get on with this process. There are other things around this is that it's happening, and this maybe you consider more cultural, but very important. Megyn Kelly went on air yesterday on her Sirius XM show and said and questioned whether Epstein was a pedophile at all. Right. So there's Republicans who are saying, okay, maybe we've lost this fight over whether, Trump was really involved with Epstein at all. So now let's actually undermine the truth about what happened and whether it was as bad as people think it is. She said something like it wasn't 8-year-olds and saying it's, they're 15-year-olds who are barely legal. It's a kind of just an unconscionable narrative about whether or not what Epstein did was all that bad or not. And I think therefore is supposed to sort of tell us that maybe it's not so bad that Trump was involved with it. It is so bad. It's disgusting. It's illegal. It is pedophilia. It is child abuse. It's not just offensive, it's dangerous. And so actually Ultraviolet is running a campaign right now telling SiriusXM, it's a petition right now to SiriusXM, telling them that child sexual abuse is a serious crime, has long-term consequences, and they should be cutting their ties with Megyn Kelly and dropping her show. So that's one example of kind of a way to take action that is related to this case to make sure that we are centering the truth about what happened and delivering some justice for survivors and hopefully using what had happened here as a catalyst for systemic cultural and policy changes that are needed to end this epidemic of sexual assault and harassment.
So everybody, get involved with Ultraviolet. Stay involved with Ultraviolet. I love that Ultraviolet is tracking accountability in media presenters, in corporations, and in legislation. So that is one thing. The other thing I heard you say is call your member of Congress and say, keep pushing for those files to be released. And then I think that the Violence Against Women Act is going to come up for reauthorization again pretty soon. It comes up for reauthorization all the time. I'm worried about legislation that normally has bipartisan support, normally passes in normal processes, moving forward in the smooth ways that it should. Should we be already lobbying for the Violence Against Women Act to be reauthorized?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And thank you for naming that. I mean, listen, anything that is meant to make women safer, improve women's lives, increase access to the healthcare, the services that we need to live our lives is under threat right now. And there is absolutely no guarantee, and in fact, we should consider it highly potentially unlikely, right, that the Violence Against Women Act gets reauthorized. So I think it's I think an important idea that not only are we calling Congress to say, and so thank you for naming it, as long as you're on the phone, don't just say you want these Epstein files released, right? Also demand that your congressperson support the Violence Against Women Act.
Yeah, and also for everybody on here, we have 20 seconds left. What keeps you hopeful in 20 seconds?
What keeps me hopeful is that people are taking action at huge rate. I mean, we have elections that we just came out of that were hugely hopeful. We have campaigns that we're running right now that organizations across the country and at the local level and at the national level that people are participating in at record rates. I mean, we're living through an incredibly difficult time that is nothing short of authoritarianism, but people are responding, they're not taking it, and I believe in us.
I believe in us too. Thank you so much for being on, Shauna Thomas, co-founder of Ultraviolet. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back with our next guest talking about the elections, what happened, and why there's hope. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by the amazing, spectacular, nation-lifting guest, Monifa Bandele, also of Moms Rising. Welcome, Monifa.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here because we're going to talk about what happened in the elections. Da-da-da-da. The November 2025 elections were pretty exciting, if I might say. And one of the things I realized is I was braced for negative impact. I was ready for the election outcomes to not be great. So when I woke up the day after the election, and also, truth be told, checked election returns that night, I was so excited. I was dancing, I was walking on air. We had several candidates who we have supported over time as the Moms Rising Together community actually win their races for higher offices, the governor of Virginia, the governor of New Jersey, and we had some candidates who ran on childcare, also win in a big way. You are in New York City, and there was a groundbreaking change in New York City. Can you share a little bit about the importance of the mayoral New York City and why it mattered?
Absolutely. The race in New York City was historic. It definitely was a message, and in my opinion, a mandate that candidates need to make bold and very transformational agendas in order to increase turnout, in order to inspire volunteers. Zoran Mamdani definitely did that here in New York City, especially centering universal childcare. We love to hear it. New York City is already a place where we have a pre-K program, but we know that people are still spending more than you'd pay for our local public college to put their children in childcare so that they can go to work, so that they can go to school, and all the things. And we know that other wealthy nations around the world all have universal child care. You know, the United States is like an outlier. So for us to have someone who's coming in on a promise of universal child care was so inspiring to folks. He also is talking about developing a department of community safety. And that's something we've been talking about at Moms Rising forever, that we need to put in place first responders that are that have specific trainings and specialties for whatever is happening. So if someone is having a mental health crisis, they're going to get a mental health specialist first responder. If someone is having a dispute that's domestic or local that needs mediation, they'll get a professional mediator. If someone's having a health crisis, they will get the proper first responder health crisis. And really, the promise is to invest in what we call the social determinants of safety, the after school programs, the summer jobs, keeping the libraries open. We know all of this makes communities safe in a way that doesn't push people into a prison pipeline. So those two issues, I think, really, really inspired the base in New York City and defeated a very popular dynasty in the state, actually, multi-generational, very popular name in former Governor Cuomo. So it was exciting. 100,000 volunteers.
100,000 volunteers in one city, New York City. It was inspiring. And to your point about a big, bold agenda making a difference, that big, bold agenda inspired those volunteers. It inspired voters. It inspired dancing. It inspired so much and inspired, of course, the victory. One of the things that I thought was really cool, to your point about the issue set, is that, we were saying, how did childcare get in your top 3 policy areas? What happened? Where did this come from? And the answer was also, I think, inspiring. The answer was listening. The campaign went around and they listened. They said, what are the biggest pain points for the people in this city? And they heard. The pain points were lack of access, like you just said, to childcare, which costs more than college, lack of access to transportation that's also affordable, lack of access to community safety in real ways that there's actually safety, and lack of access to, I believe, transportation. We said that. There was one more thing, housing. Housing
Rent,
was the other one.
rent was
Housing was the other
huge.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, really tapping in, listening, having people on the doors, having conversations with folks over time Working with grassroots organizations. There were a lot of organizations in New York City who work on these issues that the campaign listened to. And it's a winning agenda. I hope everyone around the country is paying attention.
Yeah, me too. So you all, if you run on family economic security issues like cost of living, like fair wages, like healthcare, childcare, paid family medical leave, all of those things, you win.
Affordable
Just
housing.
affordable
Yeah.
housing. Yes, you win. You win. You win. Okay, so what else inspired you about that election?
Well, I'm glad that you talked about the piece because you also live in a place, Washington, like here in New York. Housing has just gone through the roof. People can't afford rent. People have to choose between paying their rent and paying for childcare or,
Mhm.
or buying food. And so, especially in this moment where there was a threat to cut SNAP, right? To like cut nutrition assistance programs, the threats to WIC, all of that's happening in this context. And so people want a bold fighter. I heard a lot of pushback of like, oh, can you really win these things? Is it possible? Everything that we have now was at one point impossible, right? Children used to work in factories and people thought, oh, it's impossible to have, rights for kids. Rights for women were once impossible. Now we have rights for women. Rights for Black people, civil rights were once considered impossible, unrealistic, and now we have them. And so we need leaders who do think that the impossible is probable, with enough will and determination. And I think people are ready for that fight. People aren't ready to kind of acquiesce in advance. Like, this is what we have, this is all that we can have. So that was really inspiring. And the other piece that was inspiring is that the increased turnout, we had 100,000 new registered voters, as well as those 100,000 volunteers, had a lot of young people. We really had a intergenerational coalition in New York City, and we see sometimes that young people aren't as engaged. And it was record breaking from the primary to the general election, the amount of youth engagement. And that always inspires me because usually once you become an engaged voter, you stay an engaged voter.
I love that. Once you become an engaged voter, you stay an engaged voter. And you were talking also about opening the window of possibility. And you and I had an intergenerational awesome moment this past week. And there was a quote that came out of that awesome moment. And the quote is, to your point, quote, hope is a form of planning where your imagination goes, reality follows. Now, that quote is from the one and only Gloria Steinem, who, yes, Monifa and I had a chance to meet with earlier this week. But to her point, hope is a form of planning, and you have to be able to imagine the impossible in order to make it reality. And I love what you said, Monifa, that everything that we have right now was once impossible. And so, what are your thoughts on intergenerational imagining a better tomorrow and how to get there? Just a small question.
I know. It's critical. We have to do intergenerational imagining because we have to think back, and our elders have to think back to a time when we didn't have some of the things we have, right? And we have to share that with the younger people because they, of course, have huge, big imaginations. And sometimes over time, the imagination gets a little hard to tap into because you have been just inundated with the realities of the challenges that it takes to achieve these goals. And so it's a good shot in the arm to have something that is multi-generational because you have both people who are reflecting on what has been, as well as the kind of fresh, new, uncut imagination of the younger people in our households who are like, of course we can. We can do all these things. We can have all these things. Why not? The other piece that I'm learning, in addition to it being multi-generational, is that we're in much more of a global community.
Mm.
I look at my kids and their friends, and they have a lot more information about what happens around the world, whether it's because they're more traveled or because it's social media. So, this kind of like, why not, is very powerful and real for them in a way that if we think back 30 years or so, we could kind of be told, oh, that's not a thing. But they're like, no, we went, or we see, or we're in community online with young adults who have a different reality. And why are we struggling like this over here? So the global community, the intergenerational dialogue and working and engagement, all of that, I think is going to bring us closer to the Moms Rising agenda.
I love that. And I love the reframing of the question, as you just did, why not or what if? That needs to be a lot of the reframing. We've got Donald Trump in the White House, who I don't even know what you would characterize the framing as, not now or no, never or not okay, right? So we've got like a wall of no coming from the White House, from Republican leaders who just cut back our insufficient healthcare access. I mean, like, as you noted, if you look around the world, there's a lot of different ways that people are doing things, different ways that countries are doing things. We're the only industrialized nation without some form of universal healthcare. And so our insufficient healthcare coverage just got cut in that package, the big ugly bill, by 17 million people. It just got cut off of Medicaid. And now we have Republican leadership pushing to get 24 million people have their rates increase under the Affordable Care Act. And so we're in a no, no, no stance coming out of the White House and Republican leaders. And I love your idea of reframing to the why not or what if, because if we prioritize our tax dollars properly, then we absolutely can afford healthcare. There is no reason to make these giant cuts. And so I don't know, we need a whole reframing as a nation. What do you think? We need to get done with the negative vibe merchant coming out of the White House. What do you think?
And we need the wealthy to pay their share. You know, we see the burden of infrastructure of the tax base. So much of that is falling on people who are lower income, who are middle income, and it's not really being spread across the board. Not everyone is paying their fair share. And, you know, just want to note that while we're having these crises where people are going to be pushed off of healthcare, where food and nutrition assistance is just kind of like always in this tenuous position, we not only have billionaires, we now have a trillionaire, y'all. I want y'all to know that a trillion is not 100 billion, it's 1,000 billion, y'all. So, you know, sometimes you have to sit with that extra O. So there's not like a lack of resources to do things. It's that resources are being hoarded and concentrated in ways that make people have to struggle. There's no reason why folks should be working two jobs, and unable to afford the apartment they live in, the food they need to feed their families. And that's the reality. And that's why you saw people come out in record numbers in New York City to say, we want a different business model. We want a different ecosystem here. Something's not right. Not everyone is doing their fair share, paying their fair share, or doing their part. And we need a leader who's going to at least name that and challenge it.
And I was so excited when they went. So action steps. What can people do? Well, one, please double, triple check that you're registered to vote. What else, Monifa?
Share your story. Join Moms Rising. You know, part of the ways that our elected leaders know what to ask for, to know what the bold demand is to hear from constituents. And so we are the ones to let them know, hey, I know you see the data, but let me tell my story about how it is impacting me day in and day out. And we've seen that to be a very, very effective tool. In fact, the one Republican vote against the big, beautiful bill was someone who was inundated with personal stories from organizations like Moms Rising, as well as coalitions in North Carolina. And he said, I just can't do it. I can't cut people off of healthcare. I won't run again. I'll retire and I'm not going to vote for this. So that's the power of our stories.
Thank you so much for being on, Monifa. Thanks for all you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we're going to talk about why was Donald Trump breaking a history of bipartisan support for SNAP by opposing it. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a very special guest with us today, Ellen Teller, who is with the Food Research Action Center, FRAC. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really, really, really glad that you're on, because there has been an unprecedented moment in our history where food, actual access to food, has been weaponized by the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, when it didn't need to happen, when funds were already allocated for food for SNAP. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of what happened and why this is not typical?
Well, great questions. This should have never happened in the first place, and you are absolutely correct. Yes, this was the longest government shutdown in our nation's history, but SNAP and WIC and other programs should have been protected from the get-go. The back and forth and utter chaos and confusion that hit states and beneficiaries alike was just not necessary. What happened was SNAP, food stamps, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, feeds 42 million people in this country, predominantly children, older adults, persons with disabilities. It is a mandatory program. It is an entitlement program. The funds should continue to flow for it. What happened is it has a contingency fund. It had billions of dollars in reserve that we and others argued should have gone out the door day one. It is not enough in that contingency fund to serve an entire month's worth of SNAP benefits. So what came into play was this transfer authority. We argued, and others did in court, that the USDA had the authority to dip into other accounts and transfer the remaining funds that were necessary for a full month's SNAP benefits, combine that with the contingency funds and get it out the door. And the lower district court, the Court of Appeals, agreed that USDA had to use the contingency funds to get at least partial benefits out the door, but that the secretary had the authority, had the legal authority to take money from other funds and add it to the contingency funds. We were looking at this Section 32, which is another pot of money that USDA has, and the secretary had used Section 32 funds to supplement the WIC program so that people continue to get their WIC benefits. So there was a basis here for the secretary to utilize that authority.
And what was weird is that Donald Trump sued to not release funds for food for 42 million people. So not only were the funds available, not only were the funds already allocated by the US Congress, but then our President of the United States of America actually sued to make sure that those funds could not be released. And that was the ultimately weirdest thing I've almost ever seen. Why would the president? Now, let me go back with our listeners for a moment. SNAP, which is food stamps, has traditionally been supported by bipartisan leaders. That means Democrats have supported it, Republicans have supported it, independents, libertarians, Green Party, all people have supported it. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why people have supported it. One of the reasons is that it's a great return on investment. SNAP funds actually turn into being economic stimulus funds. For every $1 into SNAP, even Republican studies show that our economy is stimulated by $1.79. So it's almost a 2-to-1 return on investment. The other reason is, hello, people need access to healthy food in order to be building good lives, being productive members of our community, going to school, children going to school, being seniors in their homes. Like, people need access to food. That is a given. We all need to eat. And so in this moment, in this unprecedented moment, not only did we have the president try to block the release of the SNAP funds for 42 million people, but also then sued our own government to not release the funds. And again, this is not what is typical because there has long been bipartisan support. What do you think was happening in Donald Trump's strategy to try to do that? Why?
First of all, I want to take you to Capitol Hill with me. You so succinctly gave the snapshot of the beauty of SNAP. So thank you for that. And you are absolutely right. I have been working on these programs for 40 years. And the beauty of it is there's bipartisan support for the federal food and nutrition programs. And it's long been that way. When I first came to FRAC, we would work with Bob Dole and George McGovern in putting together improvements and protections for the program. So you are so right. And also throughout the shutdown, there were all these surveys and polling data. And the polling data was like near 80% of people surveyed across political lines said that they supported SNAP and they thought that SNAP benefits should be released and in the hands of people who needed it. And today there was an article in the New York Times and someone is quoted as saying, if we tried to create from scratch today a federal nutrition program to feed people, it would look remarkably like SNAP. We're giving people resources only for food through normal channels of commerce. They can go out and they can provide for their household based on the variety of households we have in America. And they can buy culturally appropriate foods and nutritionally appropriate foods. If you've got a child who is lactose intolerant, you can get what you need at the store for that child. You've got an elderly grandparent living with you, you can get low sodium foods for them. So it is the beauty of the program, as you said, that is an economic engine in local communities. And we talked with retailers and grocers and folks in agriculture, and the delay in getting the SNAP benefits out really impacted these folks. So to answer your question, every time the administration appealed a district court or court of appeals decision, it meant the delay in getting SNAP benefits into the wallets of into the EBT cards for SNAP recipients. And that was the real tragedy for me, that the Secretary of Agriculture had the legal authority and the power to change it on day one. And they chose not only not to do that, but to continue to delay the process going forward. And that's the real tragedy. And to say, well, we're going to wait for the government to open up. Well, this was the problem that was staring us in the face. And you had the authority and the ability to rectify that, and you chose not to.
And the funding. I mean, they also had the funding, like literally the funding was sitting in a bank account and they chose not to use it. I mean, and then they tried to pretend it was because of the government shutdown. And we're like, hello, the funding is sitting in a bank account already allocated. This is not because of the government shutdown. This is because of some weird weaponization of food in an attempt to play political football with people's ability to have dinner. Not okay. And by people, we mean 42 million people, not like 3 people. So one of the other things that I think is really interesting and important to uplift is that when you look at the SNAP recipients across the country, in many areas, there are more people receiving SNAP in areas that voted for Donald Trump than in areas that did not. And do you want to speak to that a little bit and share a little bit about the SNAP recipients across the country?
Yeah, and it was really distressing to hear the president saying, well, this is a blue state program.
Yeah, what? It's like red states have more SNAP recipients than blue states.
And it was kind of playing to the worst stereotypes of SNAP recipients. And I have to give a shout out to Moms Rising for their ability to get testimonials and stories in the pockets of communities all across this country to allow SNAP moms to talk about what the program means to them and their children and their families. And I really do think that that helped in terms of that polling data, you know, to educate the country as to who relies on SNAP. And people are blown away when they find out it's mostly children, older adults, and individuals with disabilities. They're shocked to find out that veterans participate in the program. So yes, it is really important to dispel the worst case scenarios of who is participating in the program.
I mean, and actually, this is a good time to talk a little bit more about who is participating. Who is participating in the SNAP program?
Well, children are the vast majority of SNAP recipients. I mean, it's nearly 38% of SNAP goes to children. And then you have about 20% are older adults. So, and those are people who are 60 and over. And remember, children in SNAP households automatically are eligible for free school meals. So it is that gateway for kids getting free school meals, and that's really important. And what I worry about, Kristen, moving forward is this is not over. I mean, the ink wasn't even dry on the bill to reopen the government and to start all the programs up again. And the president was talking about SNAP in terms of fraud, waste, and abuse and clamping down on the program. Literally doubling down on the rhetoric that we heard during the shutdown, as if he hadn't heard any of these testimonials and stories about the people who rely on the program. So I think it's really important, this is not over. We have to double down and get out those stories and educate our members of Congress as to who in their districts and in their states need this program. And when you explain that the vast majority of people on SNAP who can work, do work, and there are work requirements built into the program, but it is at its core a food and nutrition program. It is not an employment program. And so it is just, for so many of your listeners, it's just intuitive that in order to stay healthy, in order to be productive, in order to find a job and work, good nutrition is at the heart of it. It is just so fundamental to a child's ability to learn. It's everything your grandmother told you what was important about getting good nutrition and getting fed on a regular basis.
So important. We only have a minute and a half left, but I'm wondering if you can share some insights briefly on what people can do to help support SNAP.
Yes, continue to get those stories out, as I mentioned, those testimonials. When members of Congress have town hall meetings, or they have coffee on the corner, or however they choose to engage locally, meet them where they are and try to set up meetings and bring people who utilize the program. Critically important. I was just at a meeting with some moms who are students at community college, taking classes at night, working during the day, juggling childcare for the kids. I mean, we've got to make sure members of Congress understand that there are people who are working to do better for their families. And this is exactly what we want to, put our investments in our human capital, in our people, to make sure that they succeed. And you mentioned the economics of all of this, and it comes home triplefold.
Comes home triplefold. It's so important. Everybody call your member of Congress and say, I love SNAP, hands off SNAP. And then get involved with FRAC. What's the website where people should get involved?
FRAC.org.
FRAC.org. Hello.
And there's always a call to action.
Food. Yes. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, Care Workers Month. Woo! Let's celebrate together. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a guest who we love, who we adore, and who we are so thankful for her leadership across generations, across leaders, and across movements. Welcome, Ai-jen Poo from Caring Across Generations and National Domestic Workers Alliance. Welcome.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm always excited to be with you.
I'm even more excited that you're here because this month is a very special month. It is Caregivers Month. What's happening?
Woo! National Caregivers Month is the special month that we take to honor the work of people who are caring for loved ones. Whether you're doing childcare or caring for a disabled or older loved one, someone who's chronically ill or recovering from surgery, we see you. We know how important your work is. We know how challenging it is and how isolating it can be. And this month is a month that we want to use to lift you up, lift us up, connect us all, help us see that there are 63 million of us who are doing this like for hours upon hours per week, and 130 million of us all over this country who are doing some form of caregiving, and all of that energy, that love, that dedication deserves recognition. That's what this month is all about.
I couldn't agree with you more. As you have said many times, care is what makes all work possible. Literally every bit of work on the entire planet is possible because of care. And it's both the paid and unpaid work of care. And I think that's really important to talk about. You know, there's a lot of a labor force that is a care workforce who are underpaid, underrecognized. And then we also have the unpaid work of care, which is also underpaid and underrecognized. What are your thoughts on care workers in this moment in time and the extreme wage discrimination or unfair pay that that workforce is experiencing?
Well, the professional caregiving workforce, and we just got to salute them right here, right now, and every day for getting up every day and supporting our children, making sure that they're safe and that they know they are loved and that they have all of this potential to grow into extraordinary individuals in life and contribute. And it's really challenging work. You have to be present, you have to be committed, you have to be persistent, right? So care workers who are involved in early childhood education and childcare, we salute you. And then there's the direct care workers whose job it is to make sure that our disabled loved ones can live a full life and contribute and work and go to school and even stay in the home and in the community connected to their families. I mean, this is the work of direct care alongside the work of caring for our aging loved ones. There are 6 million direct care workers who work across settings, making sure that whether we're in an assisted living facility or in a memory care facility or even in the home and community, that we have this assistance we need to live dignified lives. I mean, what could be more important, Kristen? It is such important work, and yet it's mostly poverty wage work in our country. We've never really invested in making care jobs good jobs. And this is the opportunity of our generation, is to make sure that this huge and growing workforce that we know we need and are going to continue to need for the foreseeable future, as long as we're humans, we're going to need care workers. And it's time we made these jobs really good jobs. I'm really focused on that, committed to it, because I think it could be a game changer on so many levels in our economy.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. These jobs need to be good jobs, and these jobs are not going away. At a time when we have a lot of AI apps coming forward saying, okay, well, this AI can do this thing for you and this AI can do that thing for you. Well, AI cannot actually care for you. And AI is not going to be your child care worker, your child care teacher. It's not going to be able to be in your home in times of needs. I mean, really, what's happening is a critically important workforce that is so underpaid that people are getting pushed out of their jobs. People who are excellent at their professions are oftentimes being pushed out of their job because they aren't earning enough to put food on their own table, to put a roof over their own heads. And that needs to change. People need to be able to stay in the profession that they love, the profession that we as a community and as a country and as a planet need. And what steps need to be taken in order to make sure that the care jobs, the care workforce, can be a strong workforce that can also care for their own families.
Right. That's a basic thing. If this is a job that we want people to stay in and continue to grow in, and a profession that we want to be valued and recognized, we have to raise the wages. We have to pay care workers for the work that they do in a way that they can take care of themselves and their own families. And that also means offering benefits, offering paid time off, offering health care. And we are far from being able to do that, Kristen. We have a lot of work to do I mean, the median income of a home care worker in our country right now is $22,000 per year. Picture trying to make the math work when the bills come every month on $22,000 per year. But if we fully funded Medicaid home and community-based services, for example, the program that 70% of home care workers work through, if we invested in it the way that we invest in, I don't know, military, right? That we could act, and by the way, care workers secure us and they keep us safe. Like that is a good investment. And if we did that, we could have a workforce for the 22nd century that not only is able to sustain in their jobs, but able to take care of their own families and communities and lift up the entire economy.
And I love that you mentioned lifting up the entire economy, because something that we often forget is that our economy is fueled by our consumer choices, by us being able to go and buy the vegetables in the grocery store, us being able to go and buy the t-shirt in the size that our kids actually need because somehow they grew 6 feet overnight and the t-shirt we had yesterday does not fit today. And being able to be part of, the fueling the economy means we have to earn money so that we can buy things. And so when we don't earn enough money to put a roof over our head, to fuel the economy, then in fact, everybody loses out. So when we undermine the care workforce, we're undermining the economy as a whole because we're taking out that economic stimulus from our economy. We're undermining our families, our communities, and our future leaders, because we need to be able to care across generations. And this is something that you have also talked a lot about. A lot of people are in not just a sandwich generation, but a panini, because we're squozen as a sandwich. And our panini means that we're both trying to figure out how to care for people younger than us, care for people older than us, and importantly, care for ourselves. All of the pieces are being squeezed. And at the same time, we're doing this in partnership with care workforce, with care teachers, all of the things. So can you talk a little bit about how this is both a cross-generational opportunity? Like if we get this right, this is an opportunity to live out our lives with dignity and to start our lives with learning excellence, right? And also maybe to be able to take a breath here and there. But if we get this wrong, then we all lose out. So can you talk a little about the opportunity across generations if we get this right?
Well, sure. If you think about it like you're building a house, and with a strong foundation, anything is possible, right? And when we invest in the care workforce as the foundation of our economy and strengthen that workforce, it not only benefits them and their families, right? And also the economy around them, where they're able to spend money and create economic activity and dynamism in their communities. But then they're making it possible for the parents who rely on their services for childcare, or the working family caregivers who rely on their services to go to work every day, allows them to go to work and participate in our workforce across every sector you can imagine, across our entire economy. And then there's this third benefit, which is about our children and the fact that they get quality services and care from the time that they are 6 months old, from the time they step into a daycare center or a childcare facility, knowing that the people who are caring for them are equipped and ready to do that work, are healthy because they're able to take care of themselves, right? So you're investing in the children who receive that care and the quality of the care that they're going to receive. You're investing in the dignity that our parents and our grandparents deserve at the end of their life, after they've, or at the sunset time of their existence, and after giving so much to us to make it possible. They deserve that dignity. And for people with disabilities to be able to be full participants in our local economy, in our communities, in our society. I mean, these are the dignity investments that make so much possible that it's almost impossible to quantify. So all of these layers in building a strong house and home for all of us in this country, it begins at that foundation of care work. And I don't mean to say it's more important than what families do. It's actually a partnership. That
Yes.
foundation is a partnership between parents, family caregivers, and a workforce, and all of us who play a role in care, that then makes everything else possible, as you said earlier. And I can't think of a better return on investment or a more win-win formula than that, Kristen.
I mean, it really isn't a better return on investment. If you look at childcare, for instance, it's for every $1 in, you get at least $8 out.
Woo.
Sometimes up to $20 out, right? Like $1 in, $20 out. And the thing that you said that I really loved is that we're all in this together. Many of the care workers are also parents. You know,
Yes.
we're all in this together, in family together, as strange as that might sound, in family together. We actually are in family together as a country. And when our family is broken, when our care infrastructure is broken, our house falls down. So thank you so much for building the house. I want to talk a little bit about some excitement about house building. And that is, we just had an election where we had many candidates highlighting the importance of care policies as something that they are hearing from voters. And then in reflecting what they were hearing from voters, they put it in their top policy priorities, and then they won. Do you want to talk about how important that is?
Well, sure. I mean, I think we're all feeling the affordability crisis in this country. And when people are managing their expenses, seeing costs rise, one of the biggest costs in all of our bills is care. It's child care, it's long-term care, it's health care. And I think the candidates that spoke to that and said, this isn't right, and it doesn't have to be this way, and we're going to do something about it, that those are the candidates that I think really resonated directly from people's pocketbooks to their hearts and then to the voting box. Like, it was really a powerful connection that is only going to become more powerful as we continue to feel the brunt of policy decisions that have made cuts and to the essential services that we need and are driving cost increases while our wages are not going up. And in fact, a lot of unemployment is meaning that people are struggling even more than ever to pay their bills and to afford their basic needs.
We only have about 30 seconds left. What can people do?
Join Moms Rising, sign up to get informed, to take action. Every single time you share your story as a caregiver, you get involved in a town hall meeting that Moms Rising organizes, or you show up to have your voice heard at a member of Congress's town hall, or when you even call their office to say, hey, this is something I really care about. All of these little steps add up to real change. You can make a difference.
Thank you so much for making a difference every single day for all of us. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Ai-jen Poo.
Thank you, Kristen.
Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.